right? Testing one, two.
Prevent the next war.
Indeed. Powerful Films, please welcome the filmmaker Anita Chang to the stage.
Is that from the puppy?
Oh, yeah.
Sweet.
I have like 12 things that I want to mention, but I want to hear from the audience first. We can move over so that we're
I can see people.
better in view.
Oh, I can see.
And does anybody have a question first? I don't want to just run through 12 of my questions at the same time. So, a question, yes?
Oh, no, I was just saying hi.
Student.
You look just like your mom.
Oh, God.
Thanks for coming. Can you talk about like your stylistic approach? You narrate both films that we watched, and yeah, can you just start there? I find that to be like the fact that there's not a lot of music. It's kind of, you know, used very minimally throughout the film, and your voice really carries the story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, you know, the first film, I didn't know what it was called, but I guess the technique is called the essay film, right? So it's kind of exploratory. It doesn't say either, you know, it's not very black and white, you know, in terms of looking at just things that are happening, phenomenon, and it's also, you know, kind of questioning yourself too, but it's sort of more like thinking through kind of events and things that happen and memories. And so I guess that was the way I approached the first one. Yeah, and I think for the second one, it was really to honor Thich Nhat Hanh and to see what monastic thinking and life can offer us. Because he had passed away a few years ago, and it was he's always been kind of someone that I seek wisdom from, so spiritually. And also because my father grew up Taoist Buddhist, although I was forced to be a Catholic. So I think that my father never forced Buddhism on us, but so it's just an interesting, it was a way for me to kind of, embrace that kind of spirituality. Yeah, so that's kind of how that but I think for the first one though, it's really over years. I mean, it was like, it took, I don't know, 10, 20 years to make. I mean, it's using, you know, historical footage from way back. And I think my friend who was handling the camera, the high-A camera at that time, it was very painful for her. And one of my first video teachers is Valerie, so right back there, she saw that footage, and I remember it was personal poetic filmmaking. I took a course at Film Arts Foundation, our beloved, kind of collective that we had, very powerful group. It was a powerful institution and a group of filmmakers that really collaborated, worked together because filmmaking is so expensive. But we would, you know, take classes, or I taught a few classes too, you know, but I remember Valerie looking at that footage and going, God, that is so painful. I mean, it was just the raw footage, right? So then I was like, okay, well, how am I gonna bring this back? And to think of this effort as, I think everyone goes through that, trying to talk to family members about really painful historical events. Probably, most of it is because they wanna protect you from it. But it doesn't mean that you cannot keep asking, right? And so I think that was sort of my persistency, you know, wanting to do that. And especially since I was hearing about the history of Taiwan through other people outside of my family, that I then started to ask my family, right, slowly, because they didn't bring it up at all. Yeah, so.
Can you talk about making sense of the world as a filmmaker and kind of expressing yourself through that medium compared to something like writing or music, you know, any of the other arts, sculpture, theater?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, I think film is, you know, it's time-based medium, right? It's also incredibly visual. It's asking you to balance out the visuals and also the audio for audiences, and for yourself too. I think there's so much potential in the fact that you can bring in historical and archival footage to embellish or to evoke something that you don't necessarily have at hand in the present, right? But of course, what you create also becomes this kind of, archive too. So yeah, this film had a retrospective screening in Taiwan a couple years ago. My aunt was there, who was in the movie, and she talked to the audiences about why she participated in this work, and also why she had written the autobiography of my grandmother on her behalf, although my grandmother had no idea she was writing the autobiography on her behalf. So it was all these things that I was kind of like discovering, and and I think that's the tricky part about making sense of history. Let's say, I don't want to say necessarily world history, but it's our relationship to events that have happened, and either our complicity, our I guess being part of that, our personal histories, and so I think memory is one way that we have access, but that's also really delicate, and there's an instability to that too. So I think I brought that up, in the work. And of course, silences, no one talking about it, right? That's another one. I just, participated in the Day of Remembrance events today, and they said remembrance is an act of resistance, right? So I thought that was really a powerful sentiment for, I think, what's going on today, especially. But yeah, not remembering, and the ways in which the powers that be suppress certain histories or start to change the history, remembering becomes even more important, right? And then how we want to memorialize it. For me, the second piece is because I realized, having done some work with the Okinawa Memories Initiative at UC Santa Cruz, and with our students at Cal State East Bay too, is that there were so many peace museums and peace memorials. It made me realize we had none in the United States, like zero. So I was like, wow, this is really profound, and it was just something that I'd been kind of thinking about, and particularly with, I think, Ukraine, Sudan, and then as I was finishing, it was then Gaza, and then of course in Taiwan, all my friends are getting ready as well for pending war. That's been really painful to see and experience, and that's why I made this work. And I'm so grateful to the Manifest Differently project for that opportunity, because I felt I could just say it without much censorship or self-censorship, So that's, I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
And you touched on
structure, yeah.
I was going to ask you about perception and memory, and you already covered that. So
Okay. I like your questions.
Cool.
Conversations.
With the documentary genre, in regard to documentary filmmaking, do you feel like, is that an easier way to kind of reach people, or is the narrative form, are you ever tempted to use the narrative form more to kind of, have like stars or really attractive people, or like this kind of interesting dynamic to tell a story, if it's political, historical, personal?
Yeah. Well, I'm committed to teaching, which takes a lot of time, so I wouldn't be able to make a feature narrative film. I mean, that's but with documentary, there is a way in which, with a very low budget, you can actually make something, that could hopefully bring about good conversation, right, and dialogue. So I dream about it. I think about things that are in my mind, like, gee, if I were to make a movie about this and that way, but that just becomes like an academic exercise. Yeah.
Do you have screenplays written?
Yeah.
If somebody wants to fund like a narrative feature by Anita Chang, they can ask you about it later?
No, not really. Nothing materially brick mortar written down. It's all in my mind. But we, as Valerie, and we, as you know, I think experimental documentary filmmakers, we definitely talk about that. Like that stuff gets out there, right? Remember Debut? I think Debut came out. Who's the filmmaker for Debut? It's a Filipino filmmaker, director. It was huge, and we were just thinking, wow, that's making an impact. You know,
Well,
I mean, not to say like our films don't, but it's different. It's a different kind of platform and people engaging with that work. Like, I mean, the first movie that you guys saw was on public television in Taiwan, broadcasting for 3 years. And when I went to, teach there, I had students that said, I watched your movie. I didn't know it was yours. My students from the tribes, they were like in the mountains. They like saw my movie. I'm like, wow, that's really, it's your voice. I remember you. You're talking about your grandma. And she's dissing you. And like, I was like, yeah, okay, that's the one. So it's a different, different forms of circulation.
With the first film, were there any moments or pieces of footage that were too personal that you didn't decide to put in the final cut, or things that you maybe tried to work in but it just didn't flow with the rest of the film?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I don't know if have any of you done anything with your families or tried to create a project involving your family members? I know Val did. It's really challenging. What I realized is I was happy with a movie where none of my relatives would try to kill me or like never talk to me. So in a way, everyone was okay with it.
They trusted you.
There was a consensus. Oh no, there was a lot. I mean, I think they did. I don't know, but I mean, there was. They did because I was more from the outside. But there's so much family politics. I knew one fact that I wanted to make sure that I get right in my grandmother's piece would be that she had already had someone that she liked, and she was forced into a marriage with my grandfather. And everyone was her children were denying that and said, no, that she really loved, father, right, my grandfather, their, father. And I just knew it was not right. My grandmother told me, right, I had a cousin translate like years ago, and then I said, okay, I had to explain to my mom, can you translate again? And please, Mom, I know you're her daughter and you love your dad, but I really want this to be right for her, And so my mom did, and it was confirmed that, in fact, she was already in love with someone else. Yeah, so, but then I also wanted just to make sure that the issue because my approach is a feminist approach, but it's intersectional in terms of looking at class-based oppression as well within just even groups of women, right? So I wanted to make that clear that those nuances do exist, that she was this, feminist and a democratic grandma, but she was also in a system that had different layers of oppression for women in Taiwan society, so.
Was it therapeutic? I mean, do you feel like it was like free family therapy? Like, hey, we're gonna make this movie, and we can talk about this stuff, understand it, maybe?
No. I don't think it was therapeutic.
You couldn't sell it like that or pitch it to them like that?
No, it wasn't. That T word never came up. I was just like, grandma's 99.
But is the end result therapeutic? Do you think ultimately did it feel that way, or does it feel that way when you watch it like today? How does it resonate with you?
Yeah, but I look at my grandmother and I miss her a lot. I miss her very, very much. I miss her sister, Epol, the woman that I interviewed, who's very rambunctious. She did costuming for all the theaters in Taiwan. So she, you see her studio, right? Yeah. But it's amazing. I didn't know she was actually essentially slave labor during the KMT. Until much later, as I was looking at the footage, going, wait a second, she never got paid. She just had a place to live. But she was a costume worker under the Kuomintang Women's whatever. Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting institution that I didn't know about. Yeah.
Wow. Question? Sure.
Was that your aunt? Was that the night nurse? And if she was In the middle of the night, nurse, she said she would open her shop, like she would go do to her shop after.
Yeah, that's that on. And then my grandma's sister is the older lady that I was, because my grandmother she couldn't talk, right? So in some ways, her sister was like the interlocutor.
Yeah, and the sister was the one sitting alone in the
Yeah,
shop.
exactly.
Forgive me, I kind of came in maybe like
Oh,
probably
yeah.
15, 20, my men might have missed 15, 20 minutes of the beginning, so I kind of want to see that part, but.
Okay, I'll give you the link to the movie.
Thank you.
You get to see.
We got some more questions. You ready?
All right.
In the middle with the hat? Yes.
Yeah, I was curious as to over the period of years that the film was orchestrated, did you feel any variations in the ability for them to speak freely because of politics?
Yeah, thanks, Louis. Thank you for the question. No, because at that time it was already the opposition party was winning. They were able to. Martial law was lifted in late '80s. The '90s people were still afraid, not doing much. Very. They've just been so conditioned. So I think in the 2000s, that's when I started working on this. People were more open. Although my aunt in Anaheim did tell my mother that your daughter shouldn't be making this movie. Yeah, because you guys all of us in the States might be taken into, maybe imprisoned. So that she was still in that martial law, yeah. But my mom's thinking, I don't think it'll be that bad. That's not going to happen. It's we're having free elections now, right? We have a kind of wasn't very wealthy, was very poor, opposition party. They didn't have much money, but we're getting, people are starting to vote for them. They're winning, whatever, right? I didn't know the KMT is the most wealthy political party in the world. Yeah, they're the wealthiest. I forgot where or a friend told me, or I read somewhere. They were able to accumulate so much, wealth from in China and then Taiwan, and then into the diaspora, doing whatever kinds of businesses, or property, and we have our own kind of dramas here in Chinatowns, right? On the KMT party, and Chan is missing, right? Wayne Chan is missing is all about that, which is amazing. Yeah. So I think overall we were able to talk about it. And just even talk about the ways in which the powers that be, dictatorships, what their tactics, their techniques for keeping people quiet, right, and self-censorship and all of that. Yeah. So
You had a quote?
So none were concerned about what the other might say that we felt.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, at that point when I was making it, I think people were pretty open. Yeah, including talking about the ways in which there was a lot of violence to even get to where they are. To be like what my auntie said. She was stomped on in the bathroom with these military boots, So she was injured quite a bit when she was protesting. Like she was talking about the boots. I remember I didn't put that in but the batons and all of that. So there was brute force going on as well. So but then being able to talk about that and say that is why, right, independence, our ability to control our lives is important. And don't forget this, young people, right? Like that's kind of
Thank you.
In the front row, you had a question?
Yeah, I had 2 questions.
Yeah.
So I was curious about your creative process in terms of how you, while you were making the film, how did you feel and about your own self-identity? Because for me, it's very interesting to see you having a translator and kind of learning about so it's kind of like representing the diaspora perspective. So like, what did you learn about yourself through the process, through learning about your family history?
Yeah, thank you for the question. But it's for the first film, right? Yeah. I think that, you know, I had a lot of help. I had help of people, like, let's say, who were, like my friend Justine, who was born in Taiwan but came over at 13, so she's fully bilingual. And the woman narrating is a Taiwanese grandma in Fremont, right? So my interactions with all these people were, I think, and even in my family, were really helpful in that process, right? Like, for example, public television wanted to censor, Louis. Yeah, public television actually wanted me to censor a scene. And this is, what you see tonight is the director's cut. They actually wanted to censor a scene because there was some tension in Taiwan society between Taiwanese people and the KMT. So there were KMT people and officials that were being violently attacked, right? So if they visited the South, they would be attacked by locals, physically attacked. So they, in the public television, they said, you know, that scene where, you know, my aunt says that Taiwan is a springboard, people take, and before they leave, they take everything and they go, right? Like, the producer said, yeah, we agree with that sentiment, but we feel like it's going to fuel that tension in civic life. So that was interesting, and I was like, that's it, I'm going to give you back all your money, you know, being the all, like, narcissistic, you know, independent filmmaker, like, you know, full-on freedom, that kind of thing, and maybe being kind of American, I have no idea, but and my friend Justine in Fremont, she was like, Anita, we worked so hard on this with grandma, and I was like, okay. She was like, just compromise and have the director's cut. I was like, that's a good idea. She was, you come this far, so much work, and I was like, all right. And then later on, upon reflecting on that working method that asked to take that scene out, is when I started to think, yeah, being the diaspora, it sounded like I live in Taiwan, right? So there's a degree of humility, and in terms of, like, you know, the people who have the most stake, right? They should be dictating, like, what's going on, right? Or in a movie, for example. And so I was like, okay with that. The weird thing is, 2 years ago when I had the retrospective screening of this movie at the Women Make Waves, they said, we want you to show the director's cut. Because I told them what they took out. They're like, interesting, now we want the director's cut. You know, because I told my mom, I'm like, which cut should I give them? And she goes, oh, give them the one that they approve. And then she goes, well, ask them first, right? So I did, yeah, that was interesting. I mean, it just makes such a difference, that particular sentiment, without it, right? Yeah, so that's, I think I learned, that, like, it's not just, it's not all about me as an independent filmmaker, right? It's everyone that you're working with, collaborating with, yeah. And then those kinds of potential social effects that you don't, unforeseeable effects that the movie might have, you know. You had a second question?
You had another question, yeah?
Yeah, I was curious about your thoughts on the democratic process Taiwan has gone through, like, and the current, like, thinking about the current political situations compared to what's happening in the period of your film.
Oh, what's happening today in Taiwan?
Yeah, like
versus back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I do think that, so there's so much disinformation, just like here, attacks, right? And there's a lot of influence from China too, including the desire to purchase the media, right? The media outlets. So they're constantly fighting on that front. So they know very much that the protection of a free press is absolutely critical to a thriving democracy. Absolutely critical, right? So I think that I actually wrote an article about Audrey Tang. I don't know if you guys heard of her, some of you might. She's the first transgender minister in Taiwan. And she's a genius coder. spent some time in Silicon Valley here and went back to Taiwan. So she's a digital minister, not anymore, but we did get to interview her, and then she talked about all of that. Yeah, how critical it was to be able to intercept and immediately address fake news or misinformation, disinformation right away. Like you almost have to address it within like 24 hours, you know, because then it starts to spread through social media platforms, right? And then it starts to affect, right, what people believe. And then that's the danger. So they're really vigilant on that front, and I think that helps. Yeah, and there's still the majority of Taiwanese who do support independence. Some of them are, I mean, most of the rhetoric is now that we are independent. Like we have a president, we have a military, you know, it's just that for some reason China's like in major denial about it. I don't know, it's just like, I mean, I know, I get this question all the time from my American friends, like, why does China want Taiwan so much? Why can't they just let it go and you guys just everyone could be friends, you know? And I don't want to, is it live? But anyway, I mean, my mother has a really good point. I mean, because that's, you know, she's very involved in this, but you know, she said if China is able to take Taiwan, like really take it, which is what currently you can see all those defense shelters and whatever. We were just shocked at that when we were walking around Taipei even. That means it would, if Taiwan claims is really officially independent and recognized as so worldwide, then all the outer-lying territories in China can do so as well. And then the territory of China would shrink. I mean, quite a lot. So my mom showed it to me on the map. You know, you see Mongolia, do you see like, you know, Xinjiang, do you see, you know, these countries that have, you know, independence movements. So, sovereignty movements. So that's really threatening, I think, to them. That's my mom's theory. Yeah. It just so happens Taiwan's an island. Like we don't have a land border. Which, yeah.
What were some of the more surprising responses or reactions when you showed the first movie in Taiwan? Do you remember something somebody said that surprised you or was interesting?
I think that people wanted to know what it was that my mom left out, which I sometimes don't say, you know, and then I think what it is they're touched by the fact that there's a Taiwanese American or someone outside of Taiwan that actually cares. Yeah, because they see the diaspora, the Taiwanese American diaspora, as so Americanized that they're not even in touch with what's happening in Taiwan. Yeah, I think that's probably, I hear that a lot in that respect, yeah. Yeah, and then one time I think one of my friends, a Taiwanese friend's father said, it's interesting, she's got all the kind of key historical things there, but it's really done in a different way. It's like the different perspective. Yeah. But you know, in terms of television, it's hard to know. I don't know, like, you know, people's responses, yeah, from that.
Question in the back?
I had a question about like the language aspect.
Yeah.
Like I noticed there was like multiple dialects being spoken between different family members, as well as at one point people had to start learning the sign language to communicate.
Right.
So I was curious on like your experience with that.
Yeah, it was very complicated. Yeah, for sure. I mean, at that time, I had studied Mandarin in college. My first language actually is Taiwanese, or they call it Holowei. And that was my mother tongue. I learned English just through immersion, so maybe around 6. You know, I was born in the States, you know, but I thought everyone spoke Taiwanese. I mean, that's the weird thing. You know, I'd be like, hey, you know, like, you're a pig, you took my cookie, you know. I kind of, and then I realized that, yeah, so that's why I can understand it, but I can't, the Mandarin part of it was really hard at that time for me. Yeah, and then when I started living in Taiwan, is my Mandarin I started to be able to develop that part, or that language, which is a colonial language anyway, right? So, and then there was the local language, and the sign, and the sign language is actually Asian Sign Language. It's not even connected at all to American Sign Language, right? Totally different, yeah. And my mom was learning it, yeah, with my grandmother to communicate about everything in terms of the medicine or just how she felt. And so I had, as you can see, I had like 5 or 6 translators, right, in different periods of the work.
Yeah, it was really something. Well, looking at the credits was like, wow. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Well, it's similar to like China, they have dialects. And
Yes.
I found some Chinese couldn't even understand other Chinese.
yeah, exactly. They're mutually unintelligible languages. Yeah, there's a lot of languages spoken in China. I bet it's more than the so-called, I think, 52 minority groups, right, that is officially recognized. I mean, when you say officially recognized anyway, it already implies that there are languages outside of that, right? Like in Taiwan too, there's more than just 16 officially recognized indigenous languages. Yeah, mutually unintelligible. Yeah.
When you mentioned Mandarin, you said the Mandarin was, you said the Mandarin was what?
It's a colonial language. Yeah.
As opposed to
The the other languages, spoken in Taiwan. The Holoway has different regional dialects. Yeah, so that language is from the Fujian area in China, from hundreds of years ago, migration of male laborers, right? Because of the Qing dynasty, and also the Dutch, right? And the Dutch had also 400 African slaves, in the south, that were there too. So, it's really kind of very interesting history in terms of looking at how the movement of people, labor, capitalism, all of that, right?
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Professor. I'm Jennifer from our
Jennifer,
class.
so good to see you.
Um,
Thanks for being
Yeah, I
here.
had a question. Can you elaborate on that scene where you said I'm not sure if you identified as Chinese for the moment?
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So to answer your question too, kind of piggyback on that, is, it's a very strange phenomenon where there's a mainstream narrative that tells you who you are. And it could just be based on your name. In the United States, for example, you're Chinese. But then I always knew that there was something different about my family. But I always, that was just a simple way to just go, you're Chinese. And I just always felt, I am Chinese. And my parents also, in a way, they did that too, but then that was part of their brainwashing. And then over time, both my parents started to acknowledge their indigenous roots and their background, and then but that was also at the same time my Taiwanese friends were saying the same thing. None of us have ever been to China. We don't know anyone there. We have no connection, and even if you say something like, well, you're a settler colonialist, and you're like, well, but I'm mixed. And well, that was hundreds of years ago. So how many hundreds of years ago should we go back, right? To then you're either, so indigeneity is complicated as well. So I think Taiwan's a really interesting site in that way, and I think that that Chinese part was from my friends, from my relatives, from my parents, starting to go, what? And to be also proud to say we are Taiwanese. And we're proud that this island is formed who we are and our identity. right? And that the way we are with the world, like there's nothing wrong with that, right? And then, of course, when I started working with the Department of Indigenous Language and Communication, there was so much more connection, relationships, building around our shared history of oppression, right? And the ways in which we, our families blended, and also adoption. Like that was a big thing that I noticed when I was there, that there were Hakka children that were orphaned and adopted by indigenous families, you know? And so there's, it's not so, exactly, it's not so like black and white. So I like that term blended. You know, people talk about blended families and things like that. I mean, that's kind of the culture as well. You know, but I think that there is, again, a bit of deferment, humility, you know, based on, you know, whose survival is at stake. And anything that we do, you know, even in that environment, in the department, right? Yeah, so it's a very interesting way to kind of be with each other and in our shared history, yeah.
Just a few more minutes. Is there anything you want to mention, new projects or upcoming events or anything exciting to say?
Well, Valerie and I, we're going to be, that's exciting for me, hopefully. Yeah, I can get there, she'll be there. But we were presenting in Hong Kong, right? What is the title again of the panel? She put together that, Valerie, so it's...
When is it? Cool, it sounds cool.
It's in May.
End of May, yeah.
Yeah, in the Hong...
In an Asian Cinema Studies Society.
Yeah.
Wow.
Asian Cinema Studies. So, yeah. So I'll be presenting the short video as well, and yeah, I'm working on a piece about, you know, women presidents. I started it in Trump's first term, and I'm going to finish it in his second term. I plan to finish it in his second term. So I'm going to start editing in 2026. And I'm waiting to hear from Helen Clark from New Zealand. So and then I'm going to reach out to Jacinda Ardern again in New Zealand. Because I reached out to her last year. She was booked all year. So I'm going to reach out to her to have a New Zealand component. And then probably Michelle Bachelet from Chile. And a Chilean expert who wrote a book about women and extremism, women leaders and extremism. So she's also, I don't know if she's Chilean, but she does a lot of her field site is in Chile. So to have a kind of a South America component too. And I think that'll be good, because we got Marshall Islands, the first female president of the Pacific Islands already, Ireland, and the first female president in Finland. So I think, yeah.
And we can have you back
I
to
would
show
love to,
that film?
yeah, I would love
Right.
to, it would be great. Yeah.
Before we go, Clara, upcoming events to mention at the Clarion?
Well, next week we have a potluck. It's my 69th birthday.
Happy early birthday.
Saturday, March 1st.
Awesome.
And then we have Firecracker Review, Asian Burlesque, March 14th and 15th. Got the flyers. Go to the website and check them out. Yeah. It's always a fun show. Yes.
18 plus? Is that an 18 plus show or all ages? What would you say? 25 plus?
All
18
Asians.
plus.
18 plus, okay.
Yeah. We don't have anybody.
Is there open mic tomorrow?
Tomorrow. We have open mic tomorrow.
4 to 6 p.m.
4 to 6 open mic.
Oh, man.
Music, poetry, maybe comedy if you're bold enough and keep it clean. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Garai behind the scenes, Inga, Claire, Sue.